So our next speaker is Jane Brogan, the New York State Governor's Office of Storm Recovery Buyout Program. And
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Jane Brogan. I'm the Chief Policy and Research Officer at the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. I'll use GOZER, it's much easier to say going forward. So I'm going to go through a little bit about what the Governor's Office does, and then what our buyout and acquisition programs are. And since the 6th anniversary of Sandy is this upcoming Monday, we've implemented a buyout program since the very beginning when GOZER was first started. So we have a lot of lessons learned and challenges that we've identified throughout the whole process of our program. So I'm going to touch on that at the end also. So as you all know, Superstorm Sandy caused unprecedented damage to New York, forever changing the ways in which we think about, plan for, and respond to extreme weather events. Hurricane Sandy came just a year after Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee in 2011. And it served as a wake-up call that in order to become more resilient, we have to choose techniques that work with nature instead of against it. At GOZER, we strive to put this theory into practice. GOZER was created in June 2013 to coordinate New York's recovery efforts and to administer the state's approximately $4.5 billion of community development block grant disaster recovery funding from HUD. We've designed 5 core programs: our housing program, economic development, infrastructure, community reconstruction, which are small community-based planning resiliency programs, and rebuild by design. And through all of these programs, we strive to balance between the urgent action in the immediate aftermath of Sandy and the long-term strategic planning to make New York State more resilient. So while Sandy received the lion's share of media coverage, the 2 previous storms in 2011 resulted in widespread damage and disruption all over the Hudson Valley, Southern Tier, central and northern parts of New York, many of which were hit again the next year with Sandy. So this slide shows all the impacted counties within those 3 storms. All told, 38 counties were declared as presidentially disaster areas as a result of the 3 storms. These counties are home to more than 15 million people and where GOZER's programs are being implemented. Although our entire programmatic portfolio strives to balance between recovery and resiliency, I'm going to focus on the state's buyout program. I'm going to focus on the buyout component, but we have 2 complementary programs, our buyout and acquisition program, and I'll talk a little bit later how they work together hand in hand. The state's buyout program is a voluntary program that was established to purchase properties of interested homeowners and address areas where homes, residents, and emergency responders were regularly at risk. As one of our greatest overarching goals, we strive to utilize the funding in a way that doesn't just get New York State back to where we once were, but rather reimagines the state in a better and stronger way. In the weeks and months following Sandy, housing became one of our most urgent and pressing needs, yet we quickly recognized that we could not pursue a one-size-fits-all approach to the issue due to the great diversity of New York State's communities and residents who live there, and recognizing that some coastal areas are just not meant for human occupancy. While we continue to rebuild homes across the state, the buyout program purchases homes in the highest risk areas and eliminates the need for future repairs. The program aims to address areas that have experienced repeated incidences of flooding, thereby placing lives and property at frequent and significant risk. In other words, it acknowledges the fact that rebuilding is not always the wisest or most practical solution for every area, and that some neighborhoods are simply no longer safe for residential occupancy. Once a site that is subject to repeated flooding is transformed to a coastal buffer and integrated into wetlands, open space, or stormwater management systems, it can help protect entire surrounding neighborhoods and communities. Operating in 3 select neighborhoods of Staten Island and 6 neighborhoods in the South Shore of Long Island, the program works to purchase substantially damaged properties within targeted areas of the floodplain. Once purchased, the homes are demolished and the parcels are stripped of their development rights and permanently maintained as open space. So in the bottom of the slide, it talks about the timeline of our buyout program, where we first acquire the properties, and then we demolish, Gozer goes in and demolishes the structure, and we regrade and reseed the properties. We have about 90% of our properties demolished at this point in time of the 711 buyout properties we've purchased. And we're now at the point of where we're working with local communities and nonprofit groups on figuring out what the disposition and the end use of those land is. I would also like to note that the buyout program works hand in hand with our acquisition program, which purchases storm damaged properties and then auctions them off for redevelopment in a more resilient manner. The program operates in areas with slightly less risk of future flooding, making this a tremendous strategy for select areas. The programs are truly complementary in nature. Specifically, the acquisition program is integral in retaining housing stock in jurisdictions where we're taking hundreds of homes off the tax rolls, and ensures a well-rounded approach to municipal resiliency. Again, it's not about one strategy being better than the other, but rather knowing when and where to use each. When employed appropriately, the programs become stronger than the sum of their parts. And we like to think that both undertakings are transforming the landscape of the housing recovery sector while making our state better prepared to withstand the next extreme weather event. To date, we have purchased 1,270 homes, totaling over $480 million through both the buyout and acquisition initiatives. Through the buyout program alone, we've facilitated the purchase of 711 homes, of which 155 are in Suffolk County, and we've completed 90% of the expected demolitions. Since Gozer is a temporary office, our HUD funding expires in September 2022. We are not a suitable long-term land store for our buyout areas. Recognizing this fact, we are currently in discussions with state and city agencies as well as nonprofit land trusts to think about the long-term future of these parcels. Sea level rise and the anticipated increase in the frequency and intensity of coastal storms are of particular concern on Long Island. The community has continually experienced flood damage to homes, businesses, boats, vehicles, and other property, risk to life, and increasing costs for flood insurance and emergency response. The National Flood Insurance Program has paid hundreds of claims over the years, including many repetitive loss claims. Gozer partners with municipalities in the county to ensure proper coordination with other buyout programs being administered in the area, including USDA and the Army Corps. The municipalities on Long Island are planning to use the open space parcels to build green infrastructure such as rainwater catchment systems and bioswales, as well as expansions of municipal parks and increased beach access for the public to help mitigate against future storms. In partnership with the Nature Conservancy, we are converting buildable lots purchased through our acquisition program to open space rather than auctioning them off to further contribute to the community's retreat from the coast. The Nature Conservancy raises private funding to pay for the demolitions and native seed plantings in conjunction with Suffolk County. So kind of like Allison said, I think one of the biggest things is planning for what is to happen in the future. Gozer was developed after Sandy. We were in a very immediate recovery phase, and it was the immense to just get people back in their homes. One of our most successful buyout areas is in Oakwood Beach in Staten Island, where that community had come together decades ago to talk about doing a buyout program, and they were able to bring that back up again right after Sandy. And so the biggest thing is just community buy-in for buyout areas and have the communities talking and comfortable with this idea. Most buyout programs are very expensive, so therefore they have to have some federal or state funding in it, and most times you want to have the buyout areas be voluntary rather than making it an involuntary program. Strategic retreat programs must be tailored to the ecological backdrops to which they pertain, as well as the communities they serve. No two programs can be exactly alike, as they are dependent on voluntary participation and the willingness of individuals to sell. As with all of Gozer's programs, we are not only striving to be reflective in scope, seeking to determine what of our programs we've already achieved, but we are also thinking about where we are heading next. What factors may influence future performance, and what barriers may lay ahead, and for what challenges must we prepare, and how can we go about doing so. I've listed some of the challenges that we face and we are considering on this slide. Incentivizing participation is the biggest one. You have to be talking to people long before a storm hits or long before you even offer them money for a buyout program. There are other large costs of buyouts. They include long-term operation and maintenance of the sites prior to disposition, demolition, insurance, taxes and fees, and compliance monitoring. Relocating residential properties away from coastal areas could negatively affect municipalities' revenue since the land will remain undeveloped. There is also the concern of where people will be able to find land that is affordable within distance of schools and offices when they move away from the home that they're bought out from. Working with community partners for effective disposition and transition to green space is also another long-term consideration, especially when a lot of the federal funding for buyouts is short-term. You have to have partners from local municipalities to be able to take on ownership of these properties and truly work with dispositioning them to be the most effective end use. And what we face and what we weren't able to really work through on the federal regulation side of it is buyouts of rental properties. Where it's quite easy when the homeowner wants to buy out and move out, but then you have a lot of rental properties where you don't want to displace someone who has no decision in leaving the area. And then ensuring compliance with federal requirements. As with every one of our programs, we have a lot of federal requirements, and buyouts, especially moving people, comes with a lot of them. Resiliency and preparedness efforts not only matter to our state, but to the nation, as we've seen in the storms of 2017 and this year so far. Understanding that our experiences may be useful to who face disasters after us, we are documenting our efforts, sharing best practices, and memorialize what worked and what didn't. We are committed to using our experiences to guide and inform future recoveries across the nation, thereby helping fellow local governments during times of dire need. Disaster recovery is complicated in nature, and the rapid pace of the recovery process, decisions are generally made quick in this environment, especially in the disaster recovery sphere. There is often enormous pressure to act and little time to wait for clarity. It is in this environment that we must make decisions to provide immediate assistance while thinking about how these actions will reduce the need for future federal investment and increase our ability to withstand the impacts of future storms. Remembering the natural state of the land and the way that it was intended to be is crucial. Because, of course, recovery can simply not be carried out with thinking about future preparedness, this means increasing resiliency whenever possible, understanding that stronger infrastructure and mitigation measures will make us better equipped for next time. It also means embracing this opportunity to promote the public good and protect New Yorkers in every community. Although this is just a brief snapshot of the strides we are making to protect our state from rising sea levels, increasing threats of coastal flooding, and worsening trends of highly destructive storms, it is just another way in which government in New York is working to promote public safety through innovative and green measures. GOZER is honored to be part of these larger efforts as we continue to spearhead recovery, increase resiliency, and build the capacity for greater preparedness. Thank you.
I don't think I need to introduce this next speaker to anybody in this room. Tom Miles has served as the Director of Planning for Suffolk County, the Deputy Director of Planning for the Cayman Islands, the Commissioner of Planning for the town of Islip, and has done many things since.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and I'll try to keep this as a quick overview because the time is marching along on us, and give an opportunity for questions and answers later on. I'm here today on behalf of the New York State Department of State. They are the initiator of this project and the force behind this project. I am part of a consultant team that includes Tetra Tech, Cameron Engineering, HRNA, and Nova Consulting. This is run out of the Office of Planning and Development of the Department of State. The initiative that DOS has brought forth here follows directly behind a significant study completed by the Suffolk County Planning Department in 2014. Sarah Lansdale, County Planning Director, is here tonight. Under her administration and guidance, a very comprehensive study, but it looked at all the TDR programs we have in Suffolk County, some of the problems with them, some of the issues with the functioning of those programs in terms of the supply of sending sites and receiving sites and so forth. So that was an interesting, coincidental, and important tie to DOS in terms of starting this project. So let's get to that here, and that is to look at the issue of the idea of a transfer of development rights program that was specifically oriented to the idea of moving development off of the coast as a managed retreat program. We do have, and I think about zoning as being kind of the bread and butter of what local land use law, local land use practices are. It's within every town, village, and city in Suffolk County. And I think back to way back in the start of my career when we all got excited over cluster zoning, and that was under 281 initially of town law. And it was something that was done at the time that, yeah, this is a really good idea. We can move off the wetlands and steep slopes and other important features. So zoning, as I was always told, is the rational allocation of land uses. And as we learn more, we hear about these great presentations today, at the time of 90 years ago when a lot of these codes started coming into effect after nuclear risk Ambler realty, the idea of coastal retreat was not there, and the idea of transfer of development rights and so forth was not there. But the idea now is to look at zoning as a tool that it can be institutionalized in terms of a program to move development off the coastal areas. So let me begin then with this. Okay, so TDR is not new on Long Island. It goes back to 1975. The first program was enacted in the town of Islip. We all know about Penn Central and the Grand Central Station case, but it has been used for protection of natural resources, groundwater, farmland. The Central Pine Barrens, which began it with the comprehensive land use plan in 1995, has resulted in about 2,000 acres of land that has been transferred, development rights, that constitute about almost 1,000 parcels. Riverhead has their ag protection zone, which began in 2005, moving development off of farmland and into areas planned for growth. And as I mentioned, Islip itself. And managed retreat, or pulling off the coastline, is not a specified purpose at the present time. And in fact, it's not in the enabling legislation at the present time as well. So that's something else that will need to be addressed. The program in terms of DOS is to develop a voluntary framework that could be considered by municipalities. So really the intent of DOS is to lay the groundwork for what municipalities may want to consider for transfer development rights programs. And the DOS, as part of the response to Superstorm Sandy and the hurricanes that were mentioned with Irene and Lee, did map and create a methodology for identifying extreme risk zones within Suffolk County and Nassau County on Long Island. And that's combined by a number of factors dealing with frequency of inundation, vulnerability to erosion over a 40-year period, sea level rise, and so forth. So that resulted in this product, which identifies, obviously, the coastal areas of Long Island and includes over 19,000 properties that are, here again, within this extreme risk zone. So the concept that's now being looked at, here again, is to consider TDR as a market-based approach to managed retreat. We've heard, when we know of programs that are direct acquisition of wetlands and coastal areas, this would be oriented to be supported by the market, that would complement other strategies, and would set up sending districts within the extreme risk areas. So this could occur within a number of manners, a number of ways. And for example, TDR programs exist on Long Island and throughout the country that could be regional in nature or local in nature. And so TDR programs could, for example, be contained within one municipality. So let's just envision a village that is on the Great South Bay that is subject to the extreme risk zone, but also has a downtown that's next to a railroad station where they're trying to encourage transit-oriented development. That municipality could adopt a program to encourage the movement of development, the relocation of planned development into the downtown area as a direct program, so that a credit would have to be obtained in order to allow that development in the upland area. That's similar to the Town of Riverhead program, where it's totally within the town and it's a direct program without a development rights bank. In contrast to that would be the Pine Barrens, Central Pine Barrens program, whereby it's a regional program, credits can transfer outside of individual municipalities, and a development rights bank serves as a transactional entity to receive credits, to keep track of credits, and to enable the transfer of credits to other properties. The receiving areas would be determined by the municipalities involved, or the groups of municipalities, and obviously would be to low-risk areas that are planned for greater development, as I mentioned, downtown areas, transit-oriented developments, planned units developments, and so forth. In the Suffolk County study that was done completed in 2014, there were growth areas that were identified in the county as starting points that certainly were encouraged for additional development, that here again, individual municipalities could apply that to their circumstances as well. And then lastly, just in terms of an overview of the program, and this is really a very quick snapshot as the term was used, to look at this as a method of encouraging and providing incentives for this. Now, one is the incentives of even starting the idea of this program, and that would be part of the DOS initiative, which is, let's get into the woods on this thing, let's carve through this, and let's see what the issues are going to be and how to basically set the table for municipalities to consider this. But also, when you get into a program, what are the incentives that can make this work? And communities throughout the country have tackled this, not just with managed retreat, but with other environmental considerations, for example. And such things as density increases down in Lee County, Florida, Fort Myers, Pine Island, and so forth. They have ratios where you can transfer from high-risk areas to planned growth areas of like 2 to 1 in terms of dwelling units based on certain circumstances. 10,000 square feet of commercial development, for example, as a credit from the sending area. Other municipalities have also looked at fee waivers. The city of Pacifica in California provides for capital improvement waivers, transportation impact fee waivers. They also do such things as a reduction of open space requirements or native vegetation requirements in different municipalities. So there are other mechanisms of encouraging and incentivizing the transfer of development rights. The process we're doing for the study process, and I'm just going to really again hit this quickly, would be these background studies to do profiles of the sending and receiving areas. Some of this at somewhat of a hypothetical level until we get down to individual communities, if these are adopted. HRNA is handling the economic and market analysis, a very important part of this. The mechanics of a TDR bank, how much would it cost to set up? Looking at a regional program of a number of communities joining in and saying, hey, we'd like to consider doing this. This will provide information on, well, what would it take to actually get this up and running and to make it a possibility for us. Risk reduction easements, conservation easements that would be required. There's a whole aspect to this that would have to deal with the sending sites in terms of what is the use of those sites. As we've heard today, these are sites that could be opportunities for the migration of wetlands and so forth. Certain uses depending on the location of those properties. Local laws, TDR is certainly allowed under current enabling legislation in town, village, and city law. But here again, there's a need for an amendment to most likely to that enabling legislation. It does not specifically deal with managed retreat. And then lastly would be the stewardship, similar to what Jane has spoken about in terms of the GOSER programs. The project moving forward in terms of the process would be public engagement and the establishment of a project website, coordination with the municipalities in the county, certainly Nassau County, Sean, Sally, Suffolk County with Sarah and her team, the municipalities and stakeholders. There were municipal meetings held last year, and additionally, the public outreach meetings will be moving forward. And then there are other stakeholders that would also be included. And then, of course, the big part of this is the development of a generic environmental impact statement. And the basic purpose of this is to explore the ability to relocate development out of areas of extreme risk, to get into the details on that, assess the potential environmental impacts, and then establish a rationale for agency and local government decision-making. The benefits, as we've heard and we've talked about tonight with the idea of getting off the coastal area, obviously averting future cost and danger to public health and safety. To provide an reasonable economic return, meaning on the sending sites that this is constitutionally sound, it's not constituting a taking. Lee County, Florida ran into problems where they were actually held liable for over $4 million in taking as a result of their initial TDR program, and they went back and made it more, let's see, I'm not sure the term, generous or more functioning for the private sector. But similar to the Pine Barrens, where having that option of TDR, that property owners are either assured of a constitutional use or of compensation or of an opportunity to transfer the development rights. And then obviously greater opportunities in the sending sites, possibly recreation, storm protection, and then the receiving sites for increased benefit in terms of activity at those locations. And I'm almost done, just to wrap this up, but Allison had some photos of Mastic Beach, and I just wanted to point to this one example. This is taken, I think, a week and a half ago. This is not uncommon. You can see some infrastructure, very limited development at the moment, but what's obviously not an area that should have been developed. It was platted, filed map about 90 years ago. But what's interesting, I just want to point to, is a program that Suffolk County has. There have been efforts and active efforts using federal, state, and county and town funds to buy open space here, to buy land, to protect it. But one program Suffolk County developed a number of years ago, and I think it's an interesting model for the TDR discussion on this component, is a land exchange program. And what Suffolk County did is Suffolk County receives tax delinquent parcels. They receive those that are upland. And what they structured a program that actually won an APA award to swap some of those lands with properties in the Mastic Shirley conservation area. And that's been going on for a number of years. And quietly, property owners that have land within the Mastic Shirley conservation area that said, we have an option to develop in a better way than this. They've gone through the process to swap land. That land is then put into conservation status. Here's another photo. Here again, and this is just an every day of the week. And as Allison pointed out, this is totally common there. This may be a little bit of a remarkable case, but it's going to be more and more prevalent. And then asking in terms of the issues of challenges, TDR is very challenging. The idea to make it energized and operate, there are significant efforts to implement it. It requires staff resources. Market demand, I read a great quote in an APA publication that you should look at TDR programs as being a development incentive program as much as it's a conservation incentive program. It's got to be charged to survive, to work in the market. And then obviously post-transfer stewardship. Next steps are public engagement and then the development of the GEIS. Here again, DOS is looking to lay the groundwork for this and to have it ready for consideration in terms of the municipalities. The contact person in New York State is Jamie Ethier from DOS, and that's his contact information. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're estuary program